Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt, joined by United States Senator Tom Cotton, who's chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, also leader of the Republican Conference, making him the third-ranking Republican in the Senate. I doubt very much he went to the No Kings rally inside the Beltway on Saturday, but I'll check for news purposes. Senator, were you marching on Saturday in the No Kings rally?
Not in Washington, not in the very small ones in Arkansas or anywhere else across the country. I'll leave that to the Democrats and their pro-Hamas wing. And hopefully, now that that rally is behind us and Chuck Schumer is no longer scared of being burned at effigy at the one up in Washington, the Democrats will come to their senses, and a few more will join the three that have already been voting with us for the last 3 weeks to get the government back open, to get federal workers and our troops paid, and the government working on behalf of the American people, so then we can do the people's business.
Now, Senator, I was on Fox and Friends yesterday talking about Saturday's rally and referred to it as the largest water aerobics gathering I'd ever seen on their way to the early bird special. It was my demo. You know that, right? It was your mom and dad's demo. It was your in-laws' demo. They were moving kind of slow. It's not what the Democrats thought was going to turn. It's kind of humorous, wasn't it?
Well, to be fair to both you and my folks, it may have been your age demo, but it definitely wasn't your political demo.
Oh, no. No. But do you think it achieved the result that they needed in order to get off this thing?
I don't know exactly what results they were hoping to achieve, Hugh. I mean, I guess they thought, as Chris Murphy said last week, that he was protesting in defense of democracy, which is a curious conception of defending democracy since he keeps voting to shut down our democratically elected government.
Is there going to be any movement at all, Senator Cotton, at all, from the Republicans? Because I don't think there should be, but I don't know what's going on in the leader's mind.
No, Hugh, we've been clear all along that if the Democrats want to advocate for your tax dollars to fund health care for illegal aliens or any other such foolish ideas, they're welcome to do so after the government is reopened. And they can introduce that legislation, and we can have a vote on it on the floor if they want, but we're not going to give them a guaranteed result on such silly policies. And we're not going to just disregard the results of the election last year, in which the American people elected President Trump and a Republican Congress to make sure that we're focused on American citizens, on their needs, on getting their taxes lower, on securing their communities. Again, if the Democrats want to have these debates when the government is reopened, they can, but we're certainly not going to allow them to hold all of us hostage and demand an absurd ransom for it. I mean, just look at their own bill, Hugh, that would fund the government. It would result in more than $1 trillion of new spending. It would cut more than $50 billion from a support fund for rural hospitals who've been struggling for years. And it would extend the fraudulent, riddled Obamacare Biden COVID bonuses. That's simply not something that the American people want, and that's not something the Republican Congress will support.
Now, the first reason I came to believe the Democrats might relent this week and reopen the government is that I saw in one of the gossip sheets that their condition for passing the defense appropriations bill will be passing the appropriations bill that funds the Labor Department and other things. That's the talk that usually precedes an end game. First, do you have the votes to get the defense appropriations across the finish line with or without Democrats? Do you need 5 Democrats there as well?
We need a little more than that, Hugh. You know, we've got 53 Republican senators, so we always need at least 7 Democrats if all 53 Republicans vote together. But they had their chance on Thursday. We voted on the defense funding bill on Thursday, and every Democrat, I believe, voted against it. There may have been 1 or 2 for it, but certainly not enough to move the debate forward. They say that they'll do that if we agree to have debate on the labor and the health and human services funding bill, Hugh. The entire point of this short-term funding bill was for us to have this exact debate. If they had simply kept the government open 3 weeks ago, we would have probably already voted not just on the defense bill and the labor bill and the health and human services bill, but say on transportation and housing and military construction and veterans affairs and the agriculture department and preferably all the spending bills. This is exactly what we're trying to do. This is the whole point of a short-term funding bill, is to allow the Congress the time it needs to vote on the full-year funding bills. So the Democrats' position, again, is somewhat absurd. I would recommend they just vote to open the government and get people back to work, get them their paychecks, and then we can debate all these things as we normally would do in the Congress.
Do they, you have to deal with these folks that you work with, whether or not you agree with them or not. Young John Ossoff, who's facing an uphill battle. And right now we're talking to a lot of Atlanta. I think we're the largest show in Atlanta during drive time on their way home. Their senator is standing in the way of all the federal contractors getting paid, as well as all the federal employees getting paid. Where in your book of running for office does that make sense, Senator Cotton?
Hugh, I don't know, but to John Ossoff's credit, or I don't know, maybe it's detriment, depending on your point of view, he has never trimmed or hedged since he's been in the Senate. He has been a true blue liberal from the very beginning. He's voted to allow men to share locker rooms and bathrooms with girls and play in girls' sports. He's voted to cut off weapons to Israel in the middle of a shooting war, and now he's voting repeatedly not to support our troops, not to pay their salaries, not to keep the government funded. So it's been from the very beginning with John Ossoff for 4+ years now that he's been a true blue liberal, more like a senator from California than from Georgia, but I suspect the people of Georgia will have something to say about that next November.
I hope so. That's going to be one that we focus on. I know that Gary Peters is retiring, Tina Smith is retiring, Jeanne Shaheen is retiring, 3 Democrats. Have any of them indicated that they're willing to cross over and join Cortez Masto from Nevada and Angus King, who's an independent who caucuses with Democrats from Maine? There's one other, John Fetterman, of course. Any of those other 3 who are not running indicated that they're coming around to common sense?
Well, John Fetterman, to his credit, has voted with us every time, and he's been clear from the beginning that we should not shut down the government over the Democrats' foolhardy demands about taxpayer-financed health care for illegal aliens. Hugh, those are some of the Democratic senators you would expect to vote to reopen the government once they get past their hissy fit. Many of them voted to fund the government back in March. The problem here is that typically they'll follow those kinds of members who are retiring or self-styled moderates, would be following their elected leader on taking votes that may be unpopular with their own party. But Chuck Schumer won't do that. Chuck Schumer is scared to death. Ocasio-Cortez running against him in 3 years, and he's scared to death of his party's far left wing. So without him being willing to vote for this bill, you got many other fewer Democratic senators saying they're not going to either.
Quick last question, Senator Cotton. The president directed Secretary Hegseth, and they found the money to pay the troops last week. Can that be done twice? Is there enough undetermined money in the Pentagon that they can find what they need to make payroll again?
I think that's to be determined, Hugh. Obviously, the department's budget is very large. They were able to find enough for one payroll period, but that's a pretty sizable chunk of change when you think about what all of our troops make across the country. The simplest thing to do to avoid that necessity, again, would be for the Democrats to vote to reopen the government, and then we can debate whatever issue they want while we're paying our troops, while we're paying federal law enforcement officers, while we're funding health care and nutritional needs for poor women with young children. That's the simplest way to make sure all of these priorities are funded, is to reopen the government. Agreed.
Senator Cotton, thank you so much. We avoided all Red Sox and Guardians talk, so that was a win as well for both of us. I'll be right back. Stay tuned, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are sponsored in part by Consumer Cellular.